Frank Herbert Mason was an American painter who stood as a symbol of artistic dedication and reverence for tradition in a rapidly changing 20th century art world. His steadfast commitment to the principles of the old masters, coupled with his long tenure as an influential teacher at the Art Students League of New York, shaped generations of artists and helped preserve the classical techniques of painting. Throughout his life, Mason was a passionate advocate for the purity of art, fighting against the degradation of historical masterpieces through improper restoration techniques, and tirelessly working to maintain the integrity of the traditions passed down from the great painters of the past. His legacy, spanning more than 7 decades, is one of immense dedication to both art and its education, ensuring that the beauty of classical realism would continue to inspire and shape the world for years to come. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1921, Frank Mason exhibited an early aptitude for drawing. Growing up in a family that fostered a love of culture and creativity, Mason's home life was an environment that encouraged artistic exploration. His father, an amateur violinist, exposed him to the broader world of music, which undoubtedly influenced Mason's sense of rhythm and harmony, concepts that he would later explore in his paintings. From a young age, Mason was entranced by the process of capturing the world around him through art. His natural ability to translate what he observed into compelling, lifelike drawings did not go unnoticed, and it was clear early on that art would be his life's calling. By the time Mason reached high school, he was already committed to pursuing a career as an artist, a path that would lead him to New York City in 1939. There, he enrolled at the prestigious Art Students League of New York, an institution that had a long history of fostering creative talent. At the League, Mason studied under Frank Vincent DuMond, a painter whose influence would deeply shape Mason's approach to art. DuMond was a staunch proponent of the techniques of the old masters, and it was under his mentorship that Mason was introduced to the rigorous discipline of traditional oil painting. DuMond's prismatic palette, which allowed for an exquisite range of colors by utilizing the full spectrum of light, was a revelation to Mason, who would go on to adopt and refine this system in his own work. Under DuMond's tutelage, Mason honed his technical skills and developed a deep appreciation for the meticulous process of painting. DuMond instilled in him a reverence for the classics, painters such as Titian, Michelangelo, and Caravaggio, and emphasized the importance of studying their techniques. These early lessons would become the foundation of Mason's artistic philosophy, one that he would carry with him throughout his career as both an artist and a teacher. One of the most significant aspects of Mason's training at the Art Students League was the focus on light and its interaction with color. For Mason, mastering the depiction of natural light became an obsession. He believed that light was the key to rendering reality on canvas, and that an artist's ability to control and manipulate it determined the success of a painting. This attention to light would become a hallmark of Mason's work. As he sought to capture the delicate and shifting qualities of natural illumination in his portraits, landscapes, and religious scenes. Mason's artistic journey was not limited to his education in New York. In the early 1940s, he traveled to Europe, where he immersed himself in the art of the Renaissance and Baroque periods. Italy, in particular, held a special place in Mason's heart. There, he studied the works of the great Italian masters, absorbing their techniques and philosophies. The influence of Michelangelo, Caravaggio, and Titian is evident in Mason's work, particularly in his dramatic use of light and shadow, and his preference for classical, timeless subject matter. These early experiences abroad cemented Mason's belief in the importance of tradition and the value of learning from the masters of the past. Mason returned to the United States with a renewed sense of purpose and began to establish himself as a serious artist. His work, characterized by its rich colors, masterful use of light, and classical composition, began to attract attention. However, Mason's dedication to traditional methods set him apart from many of his contemporaries. During the mid-20th century, the American art scene was increasingly dominated by modernist movements, such as abstract expressionism, which prioritized emotion, spontaneity, and non-representational forms over the technical precision and realism of classical painting. While many artists were abandoning traditional methods in favor of more experimental approaches, Mason remained steadfast in his belief that the techniques of the old masters were not only relevant, but essential to the creation of great art. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Mason exhibited widely, earning a reputation for his masterful craftsmanship and commitment to classical realism. His works, which often depicted religious or historical themes, stood in stark contrast to the avant-garde trends of the time. Yet, despite the growing popularity of abstract and modern art, Mason's dedication to his craft earned him respect from both critics and peers. His paintings, which often featured dramatic lighting and a deep sense of spirituality, conveyed a sense of timeless beauty and human emotion that resonated with audiences. In addition to his work as a painter, Mason became increasingly involved in mural painting, a medium that allowed him to explore larger compositions and more complex narratives. His murals, many of which were commissioned for churches and other public buildings, reflected his deep interest in religious themes and his mastery of large-scale design. These works further solidified Mason's reputation as a classical artist in an era increasingly dominated by modernism. While Mason's work as a painter was garnering recognition, it was his role as a teacher that would ultimately define much of his legacy. In 1951, he was invited to join the faculty of the Art Students League, where he would teach for the next 5 decades. As an instructor, Mason was known for his exacting standards and his deep commitment to the classical tradition. He believed that every artist needed to master the fundamentals of drawing and painting before they could develop their own unique style. His classes were notoriously rigorous, with Mason insisting that his students learn the basic principles of composition, anatomy, and color theory before moving on to more advanced techniques. Mason's teaching style was heavily influenced by the methods of his mentor, Frank Vincent DuMond. Like DuMond, Mason believed in the importance of a prismatic palette, a system of color theory based on the full spectrum of natural light. He taught his students to see the world in terms of light and shadow, and to understand how these elements could be manipulated to create depth, form, and atmosphere. Mason's approach to teaching was not just about technical proficiency, however. He also sought to instill in his students a deep appreciation for the history of art, encouraging them to study the works of the old masters and to learn from their techniques. Over the years, Mason's classes at the Art Students League attracted a dedicated following. Many of his students went on to become successful artists in their own right, and they often cited Mason's influence as critical to their development. For Mason, teaching was not just a job. It was a way to ensure that the techniques and traditions he valued so deeply would continue to be passed down to future generations. His classroom became a haven for those who wanted to learn the classical techniques that were becoming increasingly rare in a modern art world, dominated by abstraction and conceptualism. Mason's impact as a teacher extended far beyond the walls of the Art Students League. He became a mentor and advisor to countless young artists, many of whom continued to correspond with him long after they had left his classroom. His dedication to his students and his belief in the importance of traditional art making made him a beloved figure in the world of realist painting, and his influence can still be seen in the work of many contemporary artists who trained under his guidance. In addition to his work as an artist and teacher, Mason was a passionate advocate for the preservation of art history. He was deeply concerned about the state of art conservation, particularly the cleaning and restoration techniques that he believed were damaging historical masterpieces. In the 1970s and 1980s, Mason became a vocal critic of the methods being used to clean paintings in major museums, including the Sistine Chapel frescoes and works in the National Gallery in London. He believed that these overzealous cleaning efforts were stripping away the original layers of paint and varnish, thus altering the appearance of the works and obscuring the artist's original vision. Mason's activism in the field of art conservation made him a controversial figure, but he remained steadfast in his belief that the preservation of historical art was of the utmost importance. He led several high-profile campaigns to raise awareness about the damage being done to historical artworks and advocated for more conservative restoration techniques that would respect the integrity of the original works. His efforts helped to bring attention to the issue of art conservation and contributed to a broader dialogue about the ethics of preserving historical masterpieces. Mason's dedication to preserving the traditions of the old masters extended to his involvement in efforts to maintain classical art education in schools and institutions. In an era when many art schools were shifting their focus toward modern and contemporary art, Mason championed the importance of classical training for artists. He believed that without a solid grounding in the fundamentals of drawing, painting, and composition, artists would lack the tools they needed to fully express themselves. His advocacy for classical training helped to ensure that these techniques would continue to be taught and valued, even as the art world moved in new and experimental directions. By the time of his passing in 2009, Frank Mason had left an indelible mark on the world of art. His paintings, characterized by their rich use of color, dramatic compositions, and mastery of light, continue to be celebrated for their beauty and craftsmanship. But perhaps his greatest legacy lies in the countless students he taught and mentored over the course of his long career. Through his teaching, Mason ensured that the techniques and principles of the old masters would continue to inspire and shape new generations of artists. His influence as a teacher, artist, and advocate for the preservation of art history is felt to this day, and his life stands as a testament to the enduring power of tradition, craftsmanship, and beauty in the world of art.